So, triads, something that's been done to death by about every YouTuber on the planet, and something which maybe doesn't need anyone else to make a video on, but I'm going to make a video anyway. The reason I'm making this video is because I feel like triads can sometimes be something that actually makes people worse when they get really into learning them, and they can actually prohibit a lot of players from playing good improvisations. And the same thing goes with arpeggios as well. I feel like both of these concepts are a massive double-edged sword, where if you're not careful with how you use them, or you don't understand how they work really well, you can get in some very bad habits with these things. So what are these bad habits? Well, something that you've probably seen on the internet before is talking about triad pairs, and that's something like doing something like that. And every time I see someone play an improvisation which does something like that, I immediately fall asleep because it's the most boring sound on the planet. And the reason why I think it's boring is because it is not using multiple concepts in the same idea. And this is something that I think nearly every great improviser does. I can't think of an example of someone who doesn't do this, who is known as a world-class improviser. So what do I mean by using multiple concepts? Well, if we just use a triad, if we just do this, basically what we're doing here is we're just saying, okay, I'm just going to stick to triads, and I'm just going to play triads up the neck in whatever improvisation I do, and that's it. And I'm not having to work in something else that's musically going to work better, or maybe musically more difficult to do, because all my brain's doing is just thinking in triads, and therefore I can follow some patterns up and down the neck. The same thing sort of goes for a lot of these like sweep picking arpeggios. If I do like a... Now, if I play that and I play it really fast and everyone goes, wow, isn't that great? He sweep picked an arpeggio. But it's kind of locked me into a certain amount of vocabulary. I can't do anything else with that because it's so fast and it's so specific with the technique that it doesn't allow me to actually do anything interesting. And then I just end up sweeping a bunch of arpeggios in my solo because all I can do from that point on is sweep arpeggios. So instead of thinking like this, we need to start thinking about how we can integrate multiple concepts into things. And the first way of doing this is actually really simple. And it is to try and play lines that have more than one thing going on without actually stopping the line. So let's say arbitrarily, I'm in the key of D Dorian, or like let's say C major D Dorian kind of thing. That's going to be my sort of key center, right? If I do this kind of thing, I just keep going arpeggios, and all this kind of stuff, guess what? Your solo sounds like shit, okay? And the reason being is that you're not really thinking about how to use these things musically, you're just going up arpeggios. One of the things you can do instead is you can try and take the arpeggios that are going to work over whatever chord. Let's arbitrarily say it's D minor in this case. So pretty much any of the arpeggios in this key are going to work over this in the Dorian mode. You can play pretty much any of them. But what we're going to do is we're going to start with an arpeggio idea. So I'm going to start with this. And I'm going to go up an arpeggio. That's a second inversion arpeggio. I'm doing that from fret 7, 7, 7, 6, starting on the D string. And I'm going up that D minor arpeggio. But now, once I've done that, I'm going to switch my brain back into thinking scalically. So I'm going to do this. Or something like that. And hopefully you can see what happens. You get the arpeggio sound, and now we introduce something else. And we can mix and match scalic ideas with arpeggio ideas. And if you do this fluidly, if you try not to stop while you're doing it, you'll end up with a much more interesting sound over that D minor than someone who is just using arpeggio fragments. So let me just give you a couple of examples of that. Let's say arbitrarily I start with the C major arpeggio. I'll do this. I could do that over that chord. I could start with, I don't know, this. If I start with this arpeggio, this is going to be sort of a G major sound, so I can go. And hopefully you can see what I'm doing on the end of that. I'm using the arpeggio shape and then immediately trying to move off of the arpeggio into something more scalic. I've got other videos on other sort of scalic ideas which make your playing sound better. One of them is enclosures, so or all these kind of shapes. If you want to check out that video, then go have a look at that. But the whole point of this is that I'm going arpeggio into scale for my line, as opposed to just arpeggios or just scales, both of which are going to sound bad. So if I now do it the other way around, let's say I do something scalic, I get down to here, and then I'm thinking, now I'm going to go down an arpeggio. There I'm outlining that F major sound. That's going to sound really nice. And so I've mixed this sort of scalic idea into an arpeggio back into the scale. And so you can sort of move around the neck very slowly, going like... something like that. And basically what I'm trying to do there is just get my brain moving back and forth between some kind of arpeggio, some kind of scale, some kind of arpeggio, some kind of scale, diatonically within this framework. And that's going to create a whole bunch of good sounding vocabulary. And that's not going to cause this problem of just getting really stuck in those arpeggio or triad fragments. So if you're thinking about sort of learning all of your triads and learning all of your arpeggios, just bear this in mind. They are not a replacement for scalic stuff, because everyone plays scalic stuff. Even the absolute best improvisers in the world still do occasionally. But what they will do is they'll mix that in with a bunch of arpeggios, and they'll use a lot of stuff with that, so it doesn't sound really stagnant and predictable. So, you know, if we just take something else, let's say I introduce a third concept here. I introduce some chromaticisms. Let's say I do like this. So that's just me taking like a basic sort of bebop line on the top of that D minor and going like 8, 5, 7, 6, 5, right? And that fits really well in this sort of D Dorian scale. And I can do something like this. And again, here I'm using some sus arpeggios. So this is sus 4. So and that's going to sound really good over that D minor, because I can use some sus things. I can use sus 2 if I wanted to. So that, if I did another chromaticism, trying to pick out that sus arpeggio there. And your lines suddenly sound a little bit more interesting when we add the chromaticism. So now I've got 3 different concepts to play with. Your, like, whatever chromatic ideas you know how to play. Arpeggio. Sus 2 in that case. And then maybe go down a pentatonic on the end. Immediately sounds way better than someone who's just playing about with one concept. So again, something to really practice and get out of the habit of is, if you are only playing with a really 2-dimensional set of ideas, and by that I mean you've only got one approach, which is either like running down a pentatonic or something like that, or only using the Dorian mode and only doing it scalically, or only playing triads. All of these things are as bad as each other. There's not a specific one of these that's superior. And a lot of people, again, this is where I have a bone to pick with a lot of the YouTube sort of educators, is they'll be like, oh, the triads are so much superior. Triads still sound like shit if there's nothing else there. So there's no point in just learning all of your triads and keeping being like, oh, that's now how I play. That is to add in to everything that you are already doing with your sort of D Dorian scale, your D minor pentatonic, your chromaticisms that you might have learnt from like bebop language, and all of this other stuff. And if you combine it all together and you can fluidly move between them, that's when you get a really cool sound out of this. So again, you know, other things that I could try and add into this. What happens if I start playing about with some different interval spacing? So like fourths. So That's me being stupid. It's this kind of thing. And I can start playing about with fourths, chromaticisms, and then arpeggios. Pentatonic, and then into the scale of D Dorian. So you can see how many things you've got to work with here, and that's going to absolutely fry your brain if you try and mix and match all those different things. And it's something that you can try and practice if you want to, is just say them out loud. So it's like fourths, chromaticisms, arpeggios, scalic, back to fourths. Just kind of get the idea. So you can sort of try and test yourself a little bit, see how you can get between all these different concepts and how fast you can do that. Really, really challenging, even at a slow speed there. But it just gets you out of a lot of habits. It gets you out of these things like, oh, when I'm improvising, I'm only thinking pentatonic, or I'm only thinking triads, or I'm only thinking this. Really great improvisers. I mean, you take Michael Brecker, for example, as a really good example of this. You can go into one Michael Brecker solo and find about 15 different things that he's cycling at any one point. Same thing goes for someone like Guthrie Govan. There's at least like 15, 20 different concepts of which they're using fluidly at any one point. And being able to just mix and match all those things at speed is what makes them sound interesting. So if you're not practicing that way, you never end up being able to play like that. So give that a go.